Most people remember The Evil Within as disappointing, clunky gameplay, weird pacing, and outdated design. But here's the point everybody missed. What if The Evil Within wasn't bad? You just played it wrong. It is no coincidence that people are going back to play Evil Within just to realize that they completely misunderstood it. You see, when The Evil Within first dropped in 2014, expectations were insane. After all, this was Shinji Mikami we were talking about, the guy behind the famous Resident Evil, coming back to save horror game genre. But instead, as soon as The Evil Within dropped, people called it frustrating, outdated, and even boring. But after a few years, maybe it's nostalgia or a yearning for how simple games used to be back then. But right now, it is unanimously agreed that The Evil Within is one of the most misunderstood survival horror games ever made. So, what went wrong? And more importantly, why are people finally starting to love it? Do not get me wrong, I have played The Evil Within Part 1 and Part 2. While Part 2 feels more flexible and more responsive, first time I booted up The Evil Within Part 1, it felt super stiff and janky and clunky and all of those things. Basically how old video games used to feel like. Sebastian doesn't move like a modern action hero. He is slow, heavy, and awkward. But that wasn't a flaw. This was the entire point. The Evil Within wasn't trying to make you be fast or smooth like Resident Evil 4. It was trying to make you feel weak. You see, modern horror games let you fight back comfortably, but The Evil Within doesn't allow you to do anything as such. Every moment feels deliberate, and every turn you take, there might just be an enemy waiting to jump scare you. And the clunkiness that people hated, that's what makes every encounter feel stressful. You see, one thing people missed about The Evil Within is the game isn't fighting you, it is forcing you to slow down. And once you realize that, everything else starts to make more sense. Another huge complaint people had was the game was unfair. Enemies hit hard, ammo is limited, and traps are everywhere. It feels brutal, but to be honest, this was the whole point and players missed it. You were not supposed to play this game aggressively. This isn't an action game disguised as horror. It was pure survival horror. You were supposed to sneak, run when you need to run, and you were supposed to avoid enemy fights entirely. The moment you try to play Evil Within like Resident Evil 5, that is instant failure. And that is why so many people abandon this game, because this game does not tell you this directly. It just punishes you until you figure it out. But I feel the real reason people struggle with this game goes even deeper than the difficulty. Which brings us to the story, because this is where most people completely checked out. You see, at first, it feels like nonsense. One second you are in a hospital and the next you are in a village, and then suddenly you are in a nightmare version of reality. No explanations, no clear directions, and yeah, on the first playthrough, it feels messy, but that's because the game is doing something very specific. It puts you inside a broken mind. The world isn't supposed to make any sense, so it is constantly shifting, collapsing, and reshaping itself. And once you understand this, or you understand the premise of this story, you realize that this confusion is intentional. The game isn't telling you a story the normal way, it is making you experience it. And this is exactly where the game lost most players, because it refused to explain itself. Let's address the most controversial thing, the black bars. Yes, the cinematic black boxing, people hated this, which reminds me of The Order. You remember that game? That game took a cinematic approach just like The Evil Within, and people hated that game too, which was unfortunately a masterpiece. You see, these black bars made the screen feel smaller, harder to see enemies, and more restrictive. But again, this wasn't random. The developers wanted a claustrophobic feeling, kind of like when you were playing Resident Evil 2 Remake. It was no coincidence that the buildings in Resident Evil 2 felt small. I do not suffer from claustrophobia, but by God, Resident Evil 2 made me feel like I was trapped. But in The Evil Within, they wanted you to feel boxed in, limited, and uncomfortable. And pair that with the tight camera angle, it creates constant tension. You're never fully aware of what's around you. Something could be just outside of your view at any moment. Now, did it annoy people? Absolutely. But did it work? Yes, because even now, people still remember how tense it felt. But this is where things start to flip, because the exact things people hated became the reason others fell in love with it later. Another criticism was the game felt outdated, and that's kind of true, but it was intentional, as we have come to expect with this game. Everything done in this game was intentional. The Evil Within is basically a throwback to older survival horror. Limited saves, resource management, trial and error encounters, and learning through failure. You see, modern games avoid frustrating players, but this game did not care. It expects you to be patient and adapt, and over time, players started to appreciate that because horror games today, they rarely take risks like this anymore, and this is where the conversation started to change. Many years later, something interesting happened. People started revisiting The Evil Within, but this time with a different expectation. They weren't expecting fast-paced action or a clear story, and this is where suddenly everything changed. What once felt frustrating now felt intentional. What once felt confusing now felt unique, and what once felt outdated now felt refreshingly bold. Even the difficulty started to feel rewarding because once you understand the rules, you realize that this game is actually incredibly well designed. So the question isn't, was The Evil Within bad? The real question is, were we just expecting a different game? The Evil Within didn't fail because it was broken. It struggled because it refused to follow trends. It didn't hold your hands, it didn't explain itself, and most importantly, it didn't try to please anyone. And because of this, a lot of people walked away too early. But the ones who stuck with it or came back later, they found something different. Something uncomfortable, but something challenging and rewarding. Something that actually feels like survival horror again. And in a weird way, that's exactly why The Evil Within is still talked about till this day. If you played The Evil Within, do you think it was misunderstood, or do you still think it deserved the criticism it got? Let me know in the comments, because this is one of those games where opinions completely flip over time. Please, if you enjoyed this video, kindly hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell icon so you can get notified when I upload videos like this, as I am trying to hit 1K subscribers by the end of this year. And until next time, peace and love.
Incredible.